Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy That's Gaming and a new video on the channel. Now, I have decided to go SSF this league just for a bit more of a chilled league start and a bit of a change. And there's been quite a few people messaging me asking to share some tips in regards to what to do when you go SSF. Now, I need to preface this by saying I'm no expert in this field, but I have played SSF quite a bit before. I've got to Uber Elder, Maven, and most of the invitations done in SSF on a previous run, but it was a couple of leagues ago. Also, this is 100% a softcore guide, as if you want to league start this build, you're realistically going to have to push content that your build is maybe not quite up to, so you might take a few deaths. So if we start with leveling, in terms of leveling in SSF, it's exactly the same way as the trade build guide really recommends that you do it SSF anyway. You don't really want to go buying stuff in the campaign that might then be outdated by the time you get to maps. I would, however, recommend a different skill tree, as the trade skill tree relies on getting a lot of attributes on gear, which you can get around by buying a few cheap items. In SSF, you can't do that. If you don't find the right essences or you're unlucky with the gear, you're kind of going to stall your progress on leveling gems and equipping items, and that's really important. So we'll look over the tree that I recommend if you're SSF. So in SSF, this is what you kind of, not end game tree, but maybe once you're getting through your atlas, this is what your tree is going to look like. So in the trade version, I recommend going down here just because there's lots of nice juicy frenzy nodes. You can get determination, reservation, efficiency. And it's the way that most people go who played determination last year. However, they also needed to slot in defiance banner, and we don't really because the skill is nowhere near as good as it was. So what I would recommend, instead of pathing down here like it recommends in the guide, I would actually path through this area here. So once you've collected this wheel here, and early on, you're going to run this node as Dex gives accuracy instead of precision mastery, because you're not going to need to run precision at all realistically in the campaign if you take this node. Taking these nodes allows you to run anger and determination, and with plenty of mana spare to cast all your skills. And the reason I'm recommending going this way is really because of these nodes here. So this has got 10 intelligence on it, this has got 20 strength, and this has got 10 intelligence on it. So it's 20, 20, 20. One of the travel nodes is 10. You're also going to be able to take these nodes earlier, like your Frenzy Charge, your Jewel Socket, and your nodes here, which again are intelligence. You also now path directly through an intelligence and strength node, whereas in the trade league guide, you don't path through here and you don't path through here. So if you do need 13 or strength as like a stopgap, you're going to have to travel a couple of nodes to get in. It's just a waste. So this is the tree I'm going to be going in SSF. It works out about the same DPS, and it works out at a lot more life. You can get about 140% going this way, as shown here. When you go down, you're struggling to get anywhere above 110, 115. The only difference is you're going to be a bit slower because you're not getting all these frenzy nodes here. So you get increased attack speed per frenzy charge, movement speed per frenzy charge, and evasion. So this way, you're probably going to have less armor. You'll definitely have because you're not going to be taking these nodes here. Evasion, you should actually be slightly up, but you should still be absolutely fine. If you then want to respec down here later on because it's your preferred pathing, go for it. But in SSF early on, I wouldn't recommend it because it is really, really intelligence and strength heavy. And yet you don't have the option when you get to, say, end of Act 9, end of Act 10 to just go to trade and buy one item to fix all your gear. You're going to have to grind for it. So let's talk about gear progression. So in trade, I recommend waiting until you've got at least a 6 link to swap to Lightning Strike, as one of your links, if you don't have +1 strike in your gloves, has to be Ancestral Call. Now, if you're happy YOLOing and dying to get Atlas progress, you can get most of it done on a 6 link without the +1. You might die every now and again, but as long as you stack damage on gloves, jewelry, and amulet, you can definitely push through. The same is perfectly viable in SSF, but getting the 6 link might be the problem. I'd never recommend farming a tab, as the stats you lose from the chest, you'll have to make up on other items, which could be used for damage mods. Personally, I think you're much better off getting a decent 5 link, which is hopefully cheap to craft in Harvest, or you might find one in Heist, because that's a really good source of 5 links. It only takes 100 infusions on average to get a 5 link, but I wouldn't recommend wasting those getting a 5 link. You might need them for your 6 link. So the first thing you need to decide in SSF is how much you love playing Spectral Helix and how quickly you want to be pushing T16 maps. If you're happy grinding levels, gems, XP, the league mechanic and currency and sort of mid-tier yellow maps, you can go Vol Lightning Strike on a 5 link. If you want to be pushing your Atlas quickly, then you're going to need to stay with Spectral Helix until you get a 6 link. Either way, your goal whilst completing the Atlas is to end up farming Eldritch Embers to get your +1 gloves crafted. I would also Recommend that you don't hide any items on your filter that show Eldritch mods, just in case you accidentally hide a pair of gloves that have got +1 strike on them rolled already. And just remember, gloves need to be item level 75 for this mod to roll. So the important thing about SSF to me is to know roughly how you want to upgrade your gear to progress your character, what content you need to do that, and what level your character needs to be to do that content. So when we look at a capable end game lightning strike build, you're going to want a Blizzard Crown, which is a rare drop from Ritual. You want your +1 strike gloves. You want a Lethal Pride Jewel from Legion. I don't know, though, if this is worth it in SSF unless you love doing Legion, because you're probably not going to have the Divines to roll it, so you're just going to have to hope for jewels to drop that have got stats that are useful. You're going to need Pierce Enchant. The only way to get this is farming Uber Lab, and even then, it's not guaranteed. So if Lab is something you don't like doing, you need to think about other ways of getting Pierce. So you can get Eldritch Pierce on gloves for +1 fairly easy. You can also craft on gloves and helmets +1 Pierce once you've unlocked it in Syndicate. Other than that, you've got the option of taking piercing shots on the tree, which are probably not the most efficient those, but they do give you +3 pierce and a little bit of projectile damage, so they're not wasted. You could also allocate piercing shots on your amulet, but it's quite expensive, so I wouldn't recommend wasting ores on this because you're probably going to find another way to get pierce. You're going to want a 2120 Vile Lightning Strike gem at some point. This is an end game goal, and I would just always recommend having Lightning Strike gems leveling in your offhand. When you get a 2020, and then you get a Doriani's Institute in one of your Alva temples, go and try and upgrade your gem to a 2120 Vile gem. However, the only things of the above that are mandatory to get your Atlas clear is really +1 strike. It's going to make it a lot easier, and you're definitely going to need Pierce. And that's a general overview of how I plan to tackle it. So I'll now outline exactly what my steps are going to be. So I want a Vile Lightning Strike gem. So every time I get a Vile Orb, I'm going to go to Act 1, buy a Lightning Strike gem because it's already going to be leveled, and then put a Vile Orb on it. After level 12, I'm going to hit every Vile side area I come across to try and get a Vile gem. I would also say you need to level up gems you want later in your offhand, but you should be doing that in trade anyway. So things like Determination, Added Lightning, Inspiration, if it's not in your main links, are all gems you want to be leveling once you get access to it. In regards to league mechanic, I'm probably not going to touch it until after the first lab, because even if I get anything, it's not really going to be that viable. But once you get to sort of level 38, 40, you can actually get some half decent rolls of kind of attributes on gear. So that's when I'm going to start testing out the league mechanic. In Act 6, you can use the introduction contract to grind some gear if you're not quite kitted out ready for Act 6. You get about 40 tokens when you go and clear the area for Lily in Act 6. And then the quest contract costs about 9 or 10 rogue markers to complete. If you don't actually loot the end chest at the end, you can just keep getting another contract from her and repeating it. That's a good way to get gear when you've just killed Act 5 Kitava. Now, in SSF, there's not really any point of trying to breeze to maps and get in there at like level 62, undergeared, just to try and push your Atlas content. It's more important that when you get to maps, you can easily start the content and progress nice and smoothly. So I would recommend farming your favorite campaign area or the lead mechanic if it's good. So whether it's Blood Aqueducts, Foothills, or whether you want to go and do a bit of heisting, I'd recommend doing it until you're at least 66, 67, and your character can just really hit the ground running and smash white maps. Now, since there's a few crafts we need in Syndicate, a lot of people like farming Foothills and SSF, and you can do it till 10 above the area level, which I think is 72 or 73. All you basically do is just constantly reset the zone, and when there's a Syndicate encounter, the text will pop up to say what one it is. You go and complete it, and then you rinse and repeat. People are normally doing it to get the Gravicius mod, but it is a good mod now, but it's not something that's as important. So it might be that you want to concentrate on getting the +1 Pierce, or minus mana cost from Elrion, or Ellie penetration on claws. There's really good stuff like the double attribute crafts, like you get strength and crit chance and intelligence that you can craft on a weapon. They're really good too to have access early on. Now, you don't have to do it, as it's super tedious and you'll eventually unlock them all, but getting a lot early saves you possibly needing to spec into Syndicate. It's at this point I want to try and find a 5-link, and really the best ways are to do Heist before you complete the campaign, or I don't think the Harvest Craft will be mega expensive, so again we can push it through there. And 5-links are not particularly rare to drop anyway, and a decent 4-link Helix setup is going to get me through white maps, and at a push I could do early yellow maps. At this point, need to make a decision really as to which way you want to progress. Do you want to push on a 5-link Helix once you've got it, or do you want to go Lightning Strike with Ancestral Call and maybe speed grind lower maps? So in terms of progression for my Atlas, I'm going to rush Essences first because they're going to really help me boost my gear up. They're also what can compensate for having to run on either a 5-link or 6-link Ancestral Call. You can roll some really juicy jewelry and gloves, and that might make up some of the damage that you're missing. Then it's at that point, I'll take some map nodes so I can get some sustain going. Then I'm going to go into harvest. Now, this is not finalized. I may do half and half, take some harvest, some essences, then the map nodes, then finish them off. I'm not sure yet, but harvest and essences are definitely my early goals. And then by the time I'm pushing red maps, I then want to really get completion completed as much as I can and try and get to the point where I'm farming Eldritch maps, not necessarily the altars, but just the maps for currency, and more importantly, gear that drops on the ground. Been speaking to a few people that have played this build on SSF. They spec into the nodes where they drop more influence items with mods already on them, and quite a few people have found +1 strike gloves this way. I'm also going to take shrine nodes. I don't know 100% when I'm going to take them. It's probably going to be, once I start to struggle a little bit in maps, I'll take the shrine nodes just to help me out with some extra DPS. And then from here, if I'm then capable, I'm then going to take the altar nodes if I haven't yet got my +1 strike gloves, but I've improved the rest of my gear. And then it's just a case of going through and completing the Atlas. At some point, you're obviously going to pick up your first 2 void stones as they appear naturally as part of the quest line. Good thing about the introduction quest is if you fail them, you only need to complete 1 more map and you get to fight the boss again. So this is never going to be a breaking point for the build. If I go to do it and I don't think I'm good enough and end up losing my 6 portals, then it gives me an idea how close was I to killing the boss. What was the problem? Was I not doing enough DPS? Was I not tanky enough? Realistically, it's going to be DPS. So then you're going to review the build, see what you need to do to get those bosses completed, and try again. Once I've got my void stones, I've got my +1 strike gloves, and I've got most of my Atlas tree completed, that's when I'm going to review the build. Now, I have no idea how long that's going to take. It's going to be several days at least. Potentially, it could take me up to a week to do it. I really don't know. Because I've not pushed SSF from the start since all the Atlas changes and stuff like that. And it's then that I look at the build and the Atlas tree. So I look at the build, what gear's missing, what do I need to improve it? And then I look at the tree, right, I'll drop these and then we'll go here. Map nodes are something I'll certainly drop. You can normally sustain once you're juicing maps a little bit without at least all of the nodes. So I could probably drop at least half of the map nodes, probably drop the essence nodes at this point, and then spec into specific content for the gear that I want. Whether I go, right, I'm going to punish myself and go and do rituals. I desperately want a Blizzard Crown. Yes, they're rare, but I've had 2 drop, I think, in SSF in my last 2 playthroughs. I wasn't playing a Lightning Strike build, but I have had the Blizzard Crown turn up in the window. And then Legion is an option as well. If I maybe build up some Scarabs, I can take the Legion nodes because they're pretty good to farm. And that's a good thing about Legion and Ritual is you are aiming for a specific item, but then also this content will get you other gear. Like there'll be other things in the window and Ritual that you can buy. With Legion, they drop a lot of maps, they drop a lot of good stuff and incubators and stuff like that. So even if you don't get the item that you're aiming for, you're still going to end up with stuff that's probably an upgrade or at least a nice chunk of currency for later on. And then so once I'm comfortable farming T14 plus red maps, I've got a few of the specific items I need. That's when I might spec into Expedition, but it's to be confirmed. Because Rod Crafting is really good, Tusion's always good for currency, and Gwennon's obviously going to give me a Headhunter and a Mage Blood. So we'll just say I haven't made the decision yet whether I'll swap to Lightning Strike a 5 or 6 link. I think it's all going to depend on how rewarding the lead mechanic is in lower tier content. If there's a way to get decent stuff out of the lower tier league mechanics, then I'm probably going to switch at a 5 link because I just find it a bit more fun than Helix. If not, I'll stick with Helix. Okay, so that's kind of my plan. So screenshot if you want to. What I'll do now is just address the issue of a 6 link. So there's quite a few different ways to target farm a 6 link, but none of them are really quick unless you get lucky. Strongbox nodes, obviously an option because once you corrupt them, you can start dropping corrupted 6 links. But you need to rely on the colors being at least what you need, or the base is what you need. You can craft on a 6 link in terms of colors. You can use Varlorbs, but I don't know how many you'd have at this point. There's also the new tainted currency out. But really, you want to drop colors that are usable. The good thing about Lightning Strike is we're not set in stone with colors. there's decent gems that we can use. So there's Ancestral Call you'll probably be using at the start. Then you've got a choice of Inspiration, LE damage with attacks, added Cold, added Lightning, obviously Nightblade and Lightning Strike. Trinity, there's probably a couple of others that might be suboptimal but still better than a 5-link. So there is quite a few options. As long as we don't end up with 5 blue sockets or 6 red sockets, it's probably something you can make work. Div card farming is an option. I haven't looked at the Atlas rotation yet, but there are specific maps that can drop divination cards for 6 links. Residence I know is in there because I remember glancing at it, and that drops the Dapper Prodigy card. As I mentioned, Scourge is back in a form of Beyond, and so are Tainted Currencies. But Chris did say they adjusted the rate of success on these, but if you get them, you might as well use them. What else are you going to do with them? Other option is obviously the Long Haul, which is farm 1500 fusings to link the item on the bench. There is a 6-link Harvest Craft, but I have a feeling this is going to be locked behind the Ashabi currency. If it isn't, and it's just a long grind to get the Life Force, that's still going to be way quicker than 1500 fusings. But knowing GGG, they've balanced it, so it's ridiculously difficult to get. So I expect that to be locked behind Ashabi. Einar has a few 6-link recipes, but I think they're more generic, like fully create a 6-link item. So you might get a 6-link mace, and then you can basically view that as 20 fusings. Legion as well, you might get a Geomancer Incubator, which gives you a 6-link body armor, uncorrupted. So we could get most bases to work. Now, I'm sure there's probably things I'm missing in terms of 6 links, but there are plenty of ways to grind towards one. So before I go, I want to cover how I plan to craft my gear if I want to go 5-link Lightning Strike. And to do this, it's going to be necessary to get a lot of damage on other gear, which is the reason I've picked Essences and Harvest. Now, if you want a detailed guide on sort of beginner crafting with Essences and Harvest, will be SSF viable. I'll put a link in the video description to a video I bought out a few days ago. So in SSF, unless you're crafting your super endgame gear, you don't want to be leveling all your essences automatically up to deafening or sometimes even shrieking. So things like hatred and anger essences, for example, if you're using them to roll armor or belts, screaming can still roll 36 to 41% of a resistance, which is more than enough. Is 3 rolls at that better than 1 roll at 41 to 45? Yeah, I think it definitely is. So in terms of your essences, what I'm going to do is just briefly go through where I would level your essences up to and group them together. So the ones I would keep at Screaming are Greed, because that still gets a really good life roll. Hatred and Anger, because you're probably not going to be using them for claw crafts, you're going to be using them for resistance crafts, and it still comes with a really good roll. Rage for Strength, I think, is 33 to 37. Smite is the same for Int, they're usable. Zeal, you definitely can roll with Screaming, that's 23 to 25% attack speed on a claw. Doubt, which are the evasion ones, gives decent enough evasion. We don't really need them, but you can look at these as free chaos rerolls. Scorn gives really good crit multi on amulets at Screaming. Dread are very similar to Doubt in that it gives you armor. The rolls aren't anything amazing, but again, you can sort of treat it as a free chaos with a guaranteed boost to your armor. In terms of ones I would push to Shrieking, they're the ones that we're going to be looking to craft our jewelry with, which are Torment, Anguish, and Suffering. Wrath, for claws, you really want to be going to at least Shrieking once you've got a half decent beginner claw. It just gives more flat damage to lightning. Loathing, we're probably going to use for mana reservation, and Shrieking is 7 to 8, which is probably the minimum you want to use to roll on a helmet or body armor. And then Envy gives chaos res, and Shrieking starts at 26%, which is pretty decent. Now, the rest of the essences we can't really make much use of, and I have a feeling the harvest crafts that change one essence type to another doesn't exist anymore. If it does, I would level all your other ones up to Deafening, and then if this craft exists, basically you want to make the most money out of it as you can in terms of you want to make it as efficient as possible. I think you can do 9 in one batch, so you wait till you've got like 9 Deafening essences that you don't want to use, and then you put it through harvest, but I have a feeling this craft won't exist anymore. The reason we're going to craft the jewelry with Torment, Anguish, and Suffering is because we want big flat damage on rings and amulet, and then maybe get some gloves with like attack speed and some good damage craft, and that's going to make up a lot of the difference of the DPS that we might lose from having to run Ancestral Call in the links. And that kind of covers off my aim for League Start in SSF. I know it's a bit all over the place, but I kind of still not 100% sure what I want to do, but this seems like a fairly okay plan. The aim I have for the build in terms of goals is I want to complete the majority of the invitations. So the fear I'm not necessarily that bothered about because it's RNG as to whether you get the synth map to drop. Definitely want to get my 4 Void Stones. So I want to kill Uber Elder, I want to kill Maven, definitely want to do Cirrus, and I want to do all the other invitations. If I've got to that point and I'm still really enjoying the character, then obviously I'll push further and look to try and get the Fear done and stuff like that. Or if I've decided I think I've had my fill of Lightning Strike because I've played it quite a lot, then I'll either re-roll a different character in SSF or maybe go and start my trade journey. So again, I just want to reiterate, I'll be streaming the first few days of the league at League Start over on twitch.tv/FuzzyDuxy. So feel free to drop in if you've got any questions or you just want to see how I'm progressing. But as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you at League Start.